how did the Minnesota Timberwolves beat the all-conquering OKC Thunder, who had only lost 2 games going into this one, while shooting just 37% from the field and missing 14 free throws? Well, it helps to have Anthony Edwards there as your home run hitter late in a game, but for the Wolves in this one, it was a win built on the back of defense. They beat this insane OKC team by holding them to 37% from the field as well, and holding OKC to their second lowest offensive rating of the season. You need those game breakers like Edwards, but you also need to be able to get down in the mud with OKC defensively, and to me we saw that on the very first possession of this game. We know SGA wants to get into the middle of the floor and dominate, so having helpers slide into his airspace to consistently show him bodies and then fanning back out to contest shooters was the game plan for Minnesota all night long, and they executed that game plan about as well as anybody has this season. Because look, everybody knows what happens if you let the MVP snake his way into his sweet spot with no helpers digging down on him. He's an auto bucket if he's allowed to operate in space. So in every situation, Minnesota wanted to just show bodies at the ball. Look how far into the gaps the defenders move off legit good shooters to make sure that SGA has tougher decisions to make. And when they're there, they stay in those gaps and commit themselves to that scheme all the way to the rim. The third quarter of this game in particular was a masterclass in crowding out a superstar player. When Shea drives, the defense moves in with him, and when he gets to the paint, he sees a mountain of defenders in front of him, and I love that they still tried to rotate out of that as best as they could to get at least a hand up near the shots that came out of those SGA drives. This is a level of connectivity and execution that a defense needs to get to compete with the Thunder, and it's got to be over and over again. So when a shooter flares out off a stacked pick and roll action, Edwards here stays in the paint to help and trusts that his teammates will rotate and help him. That might not lead to a turnover, but it will take the possession away from the most dangerous player on the floor, and that's an automatic win for Minnesota's defense. Now obviously, there's risk involved in this, right? Essentially, Minnesota is sending these waves of bodies at SGA and daring a great team to make open looks. There's always going to be a danger attached to that where they do just make those looks. Like committing this level of gap help with an all-star one pass away is typically not something a defense wants to do, but Gilgeous-Alexander isn't a typical player, and in this game at least, they made the gamble that this would work. They made the gamble that they'd rather have Naz Reid here helping on SGA than making sure Alex Caruso doesn't get a wide open 3-ball. And that's what an all-time team like OKC forces defenses to do. If you want to sell out on SGA, if you want to completely overcommit a low man helper on his drive to take away the rim, then you have to live and die with Lou Dort corner threes with no defender around him. And look, these are the right playmaking reads from Shea, but through applying this defensive scheme constantly, you hope to disrupt his process as well. Maybe that silky floater he has is tougher with Jaden McDaniels in the gap and Rudy Gobert flying over to contest it. And when his teammates aren't making shots like they weren't in this game, you can sow a little bit of doubt into these superstars. Maybe when he gets into that trademark baseline drive and he sees the low man rushing to beat him to the spot, you get him to make an uncharacteristic mistake on the ball. Even then, we're talking about a guy who still had 35 points in this game, a genuine villain for the defense, and sometimes you just need a hero to make a hero rotation and make a hero play, while his lumbering sidekick makes multiple rotations out to shooters to help win the game. That's what it takes to steal a win from SGA and the Thunder, but it also takes commitment to this defensive cause, even when Shai isn't doing the attacking. If a team wants to sit in these gaps, they still need to rotate out of them on point, and with shooters around the perimeter, there's more rotations and more contests required to make life difficult on this Thunder team. And if you still want to do things like put 2 on the ball against Jalen Williams, you're going to need helpers in the paint for the roll man, and players willing to X out on weak side shooters. Executing these defensive sequences isn't always in Minnesota's bag, but it was in this game, and it got them this win. Because even when someone got beaten, there was a helper rotating, and behind that a teammate rotating to help them, and that sets off the chain reaction that you see when a team is really defending on a string. So far this season, we have learned that Minnesota isn't always going to execute this switch to perfection like they do here, or get into the defensive shape to be able to shut the doors on these gap helpers like this, or just continue to make those proper rotations and force misses, but in this game they did, and we do now have proof of concept that they can do it against a great team. I don't always think it's fair to expect a team to defend like this night after night, especially for a team like Minnesota, who do have a few negative defenders playing rotation minutes, but I don't think we've seen them put together a complete defensive performance like this against tough opposition so far this season. So it was nice to see them string these possessions together for 48 minutes, even against an OKC team who probably didn't produce their best punch offensively on the second night of a back-to-back. Still, even with OKC on that back-to-back, Minnesota haven't been able to rack up high-quality wins so far this season, so getting one against the best team in the league with a defensive masterclass is certainly something they can use going forward. You pair that with Anthony Edwards and his ability to just take over games on the other end of the floor like he did in this one, and there's a blueprint there to beat the best teams more consistently than we've seen from Minnesota so far this season. If you want to see more lockdown defensive performances and you want to see more breakdowns like this one, the best thing you can do is subscribe to this channel, drop a like or a comment to help Howls and Growls grow, and keep watching the videos all season long. Thanks again for watching.